Some South African residents are protesting against the registration of SPAZA shops by foreign nationals. They argue that the SPAZA shop industry should be reserved for South Africans and that the government is prioritizing foreign nationals over South African citizens. The protests have led to the closure of registration centres in some areas, and government officials are now investigating the process to ensure that only legal businesses are registered. Welcome to the Rianro Show, where I look into those stories that affect every South African in some or other way. Let's get to the story. So, we've all heard about these tragic deaths in Soweto. You know, that's been linked to the SPAZA shops. But that is just the tip of the iceberg. There is a really complex situation unfolding in South Africa right now. And that's why I want to do this deep dive today. I want to get to the bottom of it, but it seems the more I find out, the more questions arise. I want to look at everything beyond the tragic deaths. I have listened to interviews, statements from the police, statements from ministers, and followed the briefing by our president, Cyril Ramaphosa. I have sourced news articles, and I've even come up with a theory, which I will reveal at the end of this video. What's so fascinating about this story is how this one tragedy has really exposed the whole system that's in crisis. It's not just about food safety, it's also about the deeper economic anxieties. It is about the struggle for control, over these local economies. Let me string that together. It is about locals versus foreigners. For people who aren't familiar with SPAZA shops, let me set the stage a little bit and talk about what SPAZA shops are, because international viewers may not have a clue. SPAZA shops are these small convenience stores, and they are really vital to the communities in South Africa, especially in townships. They're often the only source of essential goods in these neighborhoods. They also often become social hubs where people gather, and they were often accepted as part of the neighborhood until the incident where 6 children died in Soweto. Initially, it was thought that they had eaten contaminated food from the SPAZA shops or snacks, but it later turned out that the packaging was actually tainted with a poison. And since then, a number of underlying issues have now come to the surface. These kids bought snacks, something they may have done countless times in the past, without fear. And it turned out that the packaging was laced with Terbufos. It is a chemical compound used in insecticides and nematicides, and it is a powerful chemical. It is only registered for agricultural use, so it shouldn't have been anywhere near food. How did it even end up in a SPAZA shop selling snacks to children? And what's so scary about this is that as investigators started digging deeper, it became clear that this wasn't just a one-off incident. They found food being stored at various SPAZA shops right next to these and other pesticides and detergents. They found poor hygiene practices and the sale of other banned chemicals like aldicarb, which was actually banned in 2016, I think, 8 years ago. There is a systemic disregard for basic safety protocols within the entire SPAZA shop sector. So how did the South African government respond to this? President Cyril Ramaphosa, he announced this really urgent 3-point plan. Get those dangerous pesticides off the streets. 2, protect the children. And 3, prevent any future outbreaks. If you listen to his speech on 15 November 2024, he referred to these as interventions. He also ordered all SPAZA shops implicated to be shut down immediately. And then he gave all SPAZA shops 21 days to register within the municipalities in which they operate or face closure. But here's a thought. Weren't they supposed to be registered anyway? Are the SPAZA shops actually complying with this intervention? Multidisciplinary inspection teams have been deployed in various townships. They even brought in the South African Military Health Service. They have brought in the police to investigate and prosecute anyone selling banned substances or regulated poisons or chemicals. They even went upstream to inspect the manufacturers of Terbufos, really to make sure that they weren't diverting these chemicals to non-agricultural markets. As a side note, John Steenhuisen, our Minister of Agriculture, did confirm in an interview that all Terbufos samples found in the SPAZA shops here in South Africa and that were tested were not locally manufactured, but come from beyond borders. So it seems they were really trying to address this from all angles. But it's a lot to tackle in just 21 days. Opinions may differ here. SPAZA shop owners are suddenly anxious about all the paperwork, the long lines at municipal offices, and the potential of being shut down if they couldn't meet this deadline. They were also worried about the costs associated with registration permits, licenses, and potentially even having to upgrade their shops. So what? Were these not supposed to be in place anyways when they started to operate as SPAZA shops from day one? These are not new laws or new regulations. These are existing, old bylaws and in every municipality. But there's another layer to the story that makes things even more complicated. This whole focus on registering every single SPAZA shop in such a short time frame, it is unintentionally brought to light another really sensitive and potentially explosive issue: the role of foreign-owned shops in South African townships. So let me unpack this. South African residents are already struggling economically. They started voicing these anxieties about losing control over their local economies. They fear being displaced by foreign-owned businesses, SPAZA shops, and they see this registration process as potentially legitimizing those they believe are operating illegally. So this tragedy, while horrifying in itself, has become a flashpoint for this much larger debate about economic opportunity and who gets to participate in these local economies. It's a very complex situation with strong emotions on all sides. And to really understand the full context of this crisis, we need to dive even deeper into the history and dynamics of township economics in South Africa. What are the specific challenges that these communities face, and how do SPAZA shops fit into that bigger picture? To really understand this, we have to kind of zoom out a little bit and look at the history of SPAZA shops in South Africa. During the apartheid years, black South Africans were largely excluded from the formal economy, and SPAZA shops kind of emerged as this way for people to make a living and provide for their communities despite all these systemic barriers. So they were born out of necessity. And even after apartheid ended, a lot of these barriers remained. There was limited access to capital and the lack of infrastructure, that complex regulatory environment. It makes it really difficult for township residents to participate in the formal economy. So SPAZA shops became this vital lifeline, not just for the consumers, but for aspiring entrepreneurs too. They fill a crucial gap in the system, but it also makes them incredibly vulnerable, such as when something like this tragedy happens. It highlights the need for solutions that address the root causes of these vulnerabilities. We can't just focus on punishing people who break the rules. We have to create an environment where it's easier to do business and to do so legally, the right way. Okay, so let's talk about the elephant in the room. The issue of foreign-owned SPAZA shops. This has been a major source of tension and anxiety, particularly for those who fear economic displacement. It's a complex issue with no easy answers. We can't shy away from these tough conversations. We need to acknowledge the concerns of those who feel threatened by foreign competition. But at the same time, we also have to recognize that everyone has the right to participate in the economy, regardless of nationality. So how do we balance those competing interests? How do we create a system that is both fair and inclusive? It starts with open dialogue, listening to different perspectives, and trying to find common ground. It might involve implementing policies that prevent exploitation, ensure fair labor practices, and support both local and foreign-owned businesses. It will require moving beyond the simplistic narratives that demonize one group over the other. It's about recognizing our shared humanity and working together to build an economy that benefits everyone. This crisis, as tragic as it is, presents us with an opportunity to rethink our whole approach to township economics. Instead of viewing SPAZA shops as this problem to be regulated, we can start seeing them as a vital part of the solution. What do I mean by that? Imagine a future where SPAZA shops aren't just surviving, but they're thriving. They're creating jobs, reducing unemployment, and they're generating wealth. They're driving economic growth into their communities. They're no longer seen as informal or second-class businesses, but as integral parts of the South African economy. Is this a fool's vision, or is it something that is possible? And if it is, how do we get from where we are now to that future? What are the concrete actions that we can take? For starters, we can challenge the narrative. Instead of seeing SPAZA shops as this burden or a source of problems, let's start talking about their potential. Let's highlight the positive impact they're already having. Shift the narrative. And from there, we can start advocating for policies that support these businesses, connect them with resources, and create a more level playing field. How do we address those anxieties in a way that's constructive and doesn't lead to further division? Open and honest dialogue is crucial. We need spaces where people are able to share their fears and concerns, but also where we can talk about solutions that benefit everyone. We need to think about how to support local entrepreneurs while also ensuring fair competition. This is going to require a lot of listening and understanding and a willingness to compromise. The future of South Africa's townships, the livelihoods of millions of people, depend on us getting this right. It's a lot to consider. I've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, but there is still so much more. It is impossible for one YouTuber to cover all of this in one video. There are so many different pieces. Infrastructure, access to capital, business development support, the need for open dialogue, All of these things are really crucial to moving forward. The most important thing is to change how we see SPAZA shops. Move away from seeing them as a problem that we have to contain and start viewing them as assets to township economy. They're already a vital part of the South African economy, and I think they have the potential to play an even bigger role going forward. Yes, regulation and enforcement is needed, but we also have to recognize the value of these SPAZA shops. These are entrepreneurs. They're creating jobs, providing essential goods and services, and contributing to the economy of their communities. Perhaps they deserve more of our support, not our suspicion. And that support can take a lot of different forms. It is not only the government's role in providing funding and improving infrastructure and creating a more level playing field. Communities can play a huge role in supporting their local SPAZA shops too. How so? Well, imagine a neighborhood associations coming together to create mentorship programs offering business training, or even helping a shop owner to connect with suppliers and access resources. Use your collective wisdom and resources within your communities. When you support your local businesses, you're investing in your neighborhoods. But we can't ignore these very real anxieties surrounding foreign ownership. How do we address those concerns without resorting to xenophobia and division? We have to acknowledge the fears of people who feel marginalized or threatened. But we also have to challenge the narratives that pit one group against the other. The reality is we're all in this together, and a thriving economy benefits everyone. So instead of seeing foreign-owned businesses as a threat, we should be looking for ways to collaborate and create opportunities for everyone to succeed. If these businesses are operating legally within all licenses and permits and within the regulations, then they have as much right to do business as anyone else. It might mean exploring initiatives that support both local and foreign-owned businesses, promote fair competition, and ensure that everyone has access to the resources they need. There's always hope, and that hope comes from our actions, our willingness to listen to each other, and our commitment to building a future where everyone has a chance to succeed. At the start of this video, I promised to reveal a theory I have regarding the tragic deaths of these kids. The question has often been asked, why has this now suddenly become such a problem? Why are we hearing of all these deaths suddenly of kids in townships? Now here's my theory. My theory is that these deaths may have been happening for many years, but we never knew about them. With access to the internet becoming so much easier and more people joining social media platforms, people start linking the deaths together. And in time, the problem and the source was identified. What do you think of this? Please pop a note in the comment section for others to discuss, and let's take it forward. Thank you for watching, and if you found any value in this video, please do like, share and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.